talk. So we'll just do Q&A for this portion, and then we'll go through the presentation.
We'll just play it by ear. I mean, we might find people start filtering in. We want to jump into the presentation.
Okay, but we can just start.
And we can also do the break right between preparation and response. You know, we've got that natural break halfway through the slides.
Sure.
We could actually just time it so that, you know, do like 45 minutes of questions now or 30 minutes of questions now, do the first half of the presentation, do the second half of the presentation, then do the slides. See where I'm going with that?
No.
Okay. We can figure it out, though.
Yeah. So, I mean, why don't we just all, I guess,
all right. Questions?
No. I mean, maybe you guys could all talk about, you know, the things that you guys are all, you know, just dealing with in your own careers. And that might actually be, you know, beneficial. I mean, everybody's probably at some different stages, has some different questions. You know, that might be, you know, helpful to just hear everybody talk about them. You want to start?
Sure. Okay. So, hi, Rue.
What is your name?
My name's Rue.
Rue. Rue. Okay, cool.
So I'm currently not in security as such, just general IT, and security is it's been a hobby for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just been looking for the last couple months to kind of. Also, I guess I'm curious as to how I could present, you know, any hobby work that's pertinent, you know, just stuff that I do on my own, and you know, talking around, and can that be can that at all apply in my favor when looking for a security?
What kind of things do you do when you're messing around?
I play a little bit with exploits, and I mean, I'm by no means huge on that, but you know, I play with it and build this little play networks and that's with different technologies.
So you have like a lab environment in your home? I think that's a very good selling point. I think that, you know, one of the things that I think that you know, a lot of people do look at, you know, when they're hiring people or when people are transitioning, you know, it's the ability to reflect your passion. And, you know, that's something that becomes almost unquantifiable to, you know, in any scenario. I mean, you could have, you know, education, training, all those types of things, but, you know, somebody who, you know, takes their work home with them, and somebody who lives their work and you know, makes it a part of their life. I think that, you know, that's something that's very, I just think that that's something that becomes very attractive to a lot of people. You know, especially employers. You know, I have a couple of clients that they ask the question, do you have more computers in your home than TVs? And you know, and that's a, you know, that's a good, you know, a good question. But yes, you know, could you list those things on your resume?
Actually, when I was hiring in Toronto for a vulnerability research team, one of the qualifying questions when you sent your resume in was, tell me about your home network. Because if you don't have a network like that, it depends on the job too, right? If you're going to work as a SOC analyst for a Fortune 500 firm, passion is probably not as interesting to them as a GIAC, you know, or a CISSP. If you're going to work for a small company where you really got to, I mean, throw your passion into your work every day, you know, a small consulting companies, vulnerability research teams, that sort of stuff where passion matters and that intensity is a big deal, then yeah, absolutely it counts. As far as I'm concerned, in some cases it counts more than experience. I'd rather have somebody like you, for certain jobs, I'd rather have somebody like you than somebody who's been doing it for 10 years who goes home at 5 o'clock and calls it a day. I'll take the first over the second in any case. I mean, it's why I've been working with these two for so many years. For those that don't know, Lee and Jolly worked for me at NeoHapsis. And I met them a few years ago at Hope. They came on their own dime to Hope just to hang out and do security stuff when they were still students. I mean, that to me was far cooler than anything that was on the resume. Mattered a heck of a lot more.
Carol, you had a point?
If you have a home network and you've got home systems, that's not enough to qualify you. You need to be able to answer questions about that. Because I've had people say, oh, I really want to learn, I want the opportunity, but then they tell you all the stuff in their house, and you ask simple questions about it and they can't answer it. So if you've got the systems at home, that's great, but make sure you actually actually understand the technology you've got deployed. If you've got Linux systems, make sure you use more than just the GUI. Because somebody's going to turn around and say, oh, okay, you do this, and they'll ask you about it. And if you don't know it, it doesn't help. It helps if you're able to answer about the technology you're telling me about.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite quotes is that talent is a prerequisite. I mean, that no matter what you say that you've been able to do, or being able to back it up, being able to demonstrate, and having some talent. Like it's we talk a lot about people always ask us about certifications, or what letters do I need to put after my name or whatever. And, the truth be, I listened to a meet talk. It was like you can either study to actually, for the experience, or you can study for the test. I think that, most pure security professionals truly see past the letters or the acronyms and all the, mumbo jumbo that's marketed very well to the public, versus people who, really can do it, people who have incorporated into their life. And,
I want to jump in and interrupt
Go ahead,
you here.
please.
Because I think you were about to go somewhere else. But I think the point you're making is especially true now. As the economy turns down, more and more places are looking to minimize their staff, and the people with talent will survive. The people who are just paper CISSPs won't. Talent becomes more of a prerequisite when money is at a premium. That was...
Yeah,
so
well,
I just wanted to jump there.
and talent for value too. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that there's another scenario that people are thinking right now in this economy, and I think it's probably a good business practice in general. But value, it's I like I'm a big baseball guy, and Bill James, he has something that's called value over replacement, or value over the average player. So in other words, if you can say, well, if I had to pay $10 million to get $50 million to get Alex Rodriguez, or I can get an average third baseman, it's only going to cost me $1 million, what's my upside, what's my downside? So the same thing when you're building your teams. If I have somebody who's going to be, a hard to manage, highly paid information security rock star, or versus if I have somebody who's able to do a better than adequate job, and I can pay that person, $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 a year less, but that person's going to be thankful for the experience, and they're going to make the most out of the opportunity. I mean, John, who would you rather manage? Would you rather manage a prima donna, or would you rather manage somebody who, lives and breathes their work?
So what I look for is, talent's important, but your ability to produce. You could be, we said, you could be the most talented guy in the world. I could be A-Rod. If I want to hit 10 home runs, what the heck good was he? But if I get the average guy and he's hitting 50, 60 home runs, wow, it's great bang for the buck.
Then he's no longer average, though.
Well, yeah.
That means I got more out of it.
That's true.
What I look for on my team is your ability to produce, but your ability to work as a team. I don't like the lone wolf type person who just kind of runs off on their own. Can be really, really talented, but runs off on their own and kind of keeps things close to the vest. We all work as a group. You may own your own project, but everybody else in the group knows what's going on in your project and has some involvement of it, so that we're all pulling together. And that, to me, is the most important. And kind of to touch on one thing Mike said, so having your own network at home and doing stuff at home is great, because none of these jobs are 40 hours a day or 40 hours a week.
Some of them are 40 hours a day.
When you count Twitter.
But also, you have a life outside of work. I mean, I have one person working for me who knows, who I actually told her she was working too hard, and that she was at risk of burning out. So it's like, you have to be in there for the long haul too.
Yeah.
So it's great if you're motivated and you're willing to put that extra effort in, but make sure you also pace yourself and don't burn out 3 or 4 months into the job, because then you're not helping yourself and you're not helping your group.
Yeah, so Paul DePodesta has a quote that I love, that you know who I'm talking
Yes.
about.
He's a baseball guy.
He's a baseball guy. He said he always looked for people that had something about them that caused everyone else to overlook them when looking at talent. And I've always found that when I look for people, I'm always looking for people who have a certain set of skills, and they may not have the experience, and everyone else would overlook them because of that. Or they may not have the certifications, and everyone else would overlook them because of that. But if you have the fundamental skills and the fundamental talent, the thing about the home network, and I agree with you in some sense, and I disagree in others, what I'm looking for is someone who enjoys it so much that they'll never burn out. You know, there are people out there like that. I mean, look around this conference and you'll find a bunch of people who work all day and then they go home and they play around until midnight and they don't burn out over the course of 10 or 15 years just because it's not work, it's fun. You know, and that's what I'm always looking for. The people who are ambitious for the sake of ambition are the people that I find that fall into that burnout place. Like, I'm working that hard because I want to get ahead, not because I'm having a blast. You know, me, I'll break into things just for fun. I mean, you didn't even have to pay me to do my job sometimes.
I think you have to, with those managers, just have to kind of sense where that person's going.
Of course,
See the
of course.
person always happy-go-lucky when they're coming in, and you're right.
Yeah.
When they're working 15 hours a day, it's probably not a big deal. But if they start looking a little frustrated and short-tempered on things, those are pretty good signs of burnout.
Yeah, they've stopped having fun.
Actually, what you're talking about is this difference between, when you're talking about the pure technical work people are having fun with, and I totally agree with you, I think so what John's talking about is somebody who's getting bogged down in all the politics.
Sure.
And the organizational conflicts and resolving, you know, difficulties. That's not the fun part of our job, but we have to do it.
Some
Oh,
people
why
like
is
that
that
part of
not
their job.
fun? Look, I
Some
really
people
enjoy
love
that.
that part of their job.
Yeah.
That's
I've
you,
definitely gotten into it the last
you are not that kind of person that loves that kind of part of their job. But actually, I was talking to a friend of mine who works at a very large insurance company, and we were talking about the politics. And I mean, I sometimes think he'd rather talk to me about politics than technology. You know, because, and don't get me wrong, he's a technologist as well, but that part of the job is the challenge for him. I mean, he could go code anywhere, but navigating the waters, I mean, it all comes down to, and we're going to talk about this when we actually go through the slides, but knowing yourself and knowing what you're looking for. If you're a person who hates politics, then getting into a job at a large insurance company, and I've been there and done that and have the t-shirt and the emotional scars to go with it, unless you're doing it for a very specific reason, it's a sure way to get yourself to be miserable. If you're a person who can't handle coding in absentia all the time, then maybe that's a good environment. It's all about knowing you. You, for example, I don't think would last in that kind of a political environment where some people.
No, actually, I do fine in it. I'm good at
Really?
politics, I don't like
But
it.
do you enjoy it? It's not about being good at it. It's about, can you wake up in the morning and not want to like commit Harry Carey?
It depends on the political environment, but yeah, there's some of them that no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do, it's not going to make a difference.
Mhm.
And those kinds of environments are very frustrating.
Sir, how are you? Tell us. Well, yeah, tell us about yourself, though.
I'm not a security person. I'm an IT manager at a small nonprofit affiliated department.
Uh-huh.
But I find, I came to the conference last year, I'm finding security a more interesting part of my job, and I'm not here with any particular agenda. It just seemed like a good thing to come and hear people talk about career
Mm-hmm.
type issues. I'm in a situation where it's me and another half-time person. So I don't get a chance to talk to a lot of other technology people. And I guess I see this just as a broader question about career, not just as security. And the time to look at it is, I feel like my job is secure, but better to look at this now than when something unexpected happens.
That is the time. I mean, we talk about this a lot, but the longer the time you have to prepare for that sort of thing, it's almost like hurricane preparation. The day to prepare your house for hurricane is not the day that the storm makes landfall, right? So in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. That's good timing.
I mean, I think that, the economics of what's happening around the world, and I think that, I hate to say it, but like, nonprofits with a lot of the things that are happening, could be a casualty in a lot of scenarios.
Bless you.
And I think that, one of the situations I think a lot of people have to think about is, taking the experience that they are currently doing on a first-hand basis and making it relevant to other industries or making it relevant to other folks, so you develop crossover type skills, and I think that you could do it where if you're generally in like systems administration or network engineering, security becomes something that you can kind of pull towards, and it's something that pulls you out and gives you some more breadth. I mean, one of the bigger questions that we get a lot is that there are a lot of folks that come from the government and they want to transition to commercial or corporate or professional services type firms and things like that. And that's often a very difficult transition for a lot of people to make, because there's certain things about the nature of the work that people do in government entities versus commercial entities that are just uniquely different. I mean, in a publicly held company, it's about revenue, it's about earnings, it's about driving towards that bottom line. And then in government, it's about doing your job in the chain of command, and a lot of different things that are completely different, and things happen a lot quicker. If you talk to a person who's never been in the government, their impression is that things happen a lot quicker in corporate America. But then a lot of times when people, the perspective, everybody wants to put their own perspective. If you're working in the government, one of the things that you would probably have to do in an interview if you were going the other way is to show that you can work in a fast-paced environment, to demonstrate the times that you've had to deal with increased pressure, dealing with deadlines. In other words, taking that experience and dressing it up and making it very, I hate to say the word marketable, but to the audience that you're looking for. And I think that when you look at your career plan and you look at the things that you've done, whatever, wherever you wind up heading, you should look at it as a complete bigger picture. And like the skills that I have right now, don't think about how they are just applicable to your current position, but think about how they're applicable to the ecosystems of positions. And then if there's something that's appealing or a place that you want to head, what are the things that you have to fill in order to make yourself ready for that day when that day comes? So it's like, if you could look at like a skill set matrix and you could say like, if there's a list of 10 skills and you say, well, currently I have 4 or 5 of them. The other 4 or 5 I have to develop, and they're critical for me to develop in order to get to where I want to go, or to get to where I become more valuable to some other third party. How do I go and pick up those skills? Do I go get them via training? Do I get them via my work environment? How would I go out and acquire those skills? Because we can acquire skills many different ways, but figuring out a way to kind of get those skills, that's really your issue when you're building your career plan. How do you start, making that picture, so that, making that picture really complete, I mean.
Well, actually, I can give you a real life scenario, right? Because you and I work together
Mhm.
to help me get my current position. So I currently run a security engineering group for a 5,000 person company. Prior to that, about 8 months ago, I had been in consulting for 20 years. And Lee and I talked about, how do you make the transition from a consultant to going into corporate America, where you're going to probably be there for the next 5, 10 years. And what I did was I took a lot of what I had learned in consulting and applied it to my new job. So putting methodology around projects, to say, create architecture and design documents and operational documents and make people go through a method of putting the projects out was definitely something that enhanced productivity within my organization, but it was something I brought from the consulting world. Being able to go out and sell security to the business owners, to the IT people, just like I did when I was a consultant selling security to clients. So you could take the skills that you learn in whatever your current industry is and find ways to apply them to other industries.
I think that's a real, let me jump
So,
in.
but let me just,
You
so
first.
let me even rewind that back, right? So, I mean, John and I know each other, I guess, about 2.5 years, I guess, is maybe even a little longer than that. So, but, the trick about that, what John does in his current job and what's making him successful in the current position that he's in right now are all those skills. Now, the trick is this, though. If he wasn't able to successfully navigate his way into the door and to convince not just the chief information security officer, but the CIO of the company and the vice president of the the head of the network business unit. So it was incorporating that messaging during his interview process that enabled him, and that really, because that's our audition, right? I mean, our interviews are really our audition. Everybody puts on their good suits. The employers put on their smiling faces. They say, welcome to Shangri-La, and it's going to be great. You're going to be here forever, and then everything happens, and everybody starts dancing with each other. It's like a big dating process, right? I mean, that's kind of what
it's very much like
really
dating.
what it is, right? But like the thing is this, is that there's certain deal breakers for people on both sides of that table. When you're walking into those interviews, you have to figure out what that audience is about. And you have to figure out what the objections might be to your background once you walk in that door. And then how you deal with those objections and being prepared to deal with those objections by drawing from your actual experience and articulating that in those 30 to 45-minute time blocks that you get becomes really critical in order to get you to be in a place where you're going to, to get there and stuff like that. So I think that, doing the job, building that skills make you successful, but just getting in the door, I mean, look, that was competitive, I mean, I'm sure they looked for a while before, I'm not the cheapest solution. So
I remember it was a 4.5-hour interview on a Friday, and I had an offer Monday morning.
yeah, well, that
So
was
you
good.
did
I had more money than they were willing to pay.
That's good.
Clearly, you got past the first date. I think there's very much we talk later when we're going to do the presentation. We'll talk about this, but there's really two types of job interviews, and that's really the what got you here won't get you there kind of job interview. I see the world as cleaving into black and white a lot of the time. There are the jobs that you take because it fits your current skill set. It's commensurate with what you're currently doing. If I were to go get a job managing a research team, which I've done multiple times, that would be sort of a commensurate with my current job kind of skill set. In that case, the interview is proving that you know what you're talking about, proving that you've done it before. In the case you're talking about, and the case we've been talking about, it's very much the more long-term thing. Can you grow into this type of role? And your job in the interview process is to prove that not only have I been successful before, but yeah, I can handle it. And it sounds like, and I obviously don't know anything about what your I don't know the interview process you're talking about as well as Lee does, but it sounds like the job there was to communicate not only, yeah, I can do it, but yeah, I've been a consultant, but I know how to take that stuff and make it successful in your organization, and that's a growth job. And we will talk about the difference between the two job search processes later. But to me, it's a very different process in each situation. It's a very different audition, effectively.
So I think to get to that, to like the job I had, I don't think I would have been as successful if I hadn't had somebody like me.
Of course not.
Well, I appreciate that.
Preparation
I
and
mean,
being able to bounce things back and forth
It's-
and discuss the roadmap of the interview.
It's cultural recon is what it is, and I have this wonderful thought about, and I haven't written it down yet. We haven't even talked about it, but I have this wonderful thought of getting a job as a pen test. If you do your recon effectively, and you understand the culture you're going into, and you understand, it's more social engineering than it is pen test, but we're nitpicking there. If you don't go in knowing the organization, you're going to be out of place. And what a guy like Lee does, and Lee and I have worked together before, so I know what that is he gives you the insider information that allows you to tailor your engagement appropriately. You know what to wear, you know how to talk, you know what they're looking for, you know how to tailor your information appropriately to make sure that they hear the answers that they need to hear to understand that you really are the right guy for the job.
so I mean, and so I just touched on something that Mike said I thought was very interesting, right? Mike touched, well, he's worked as a vulnerability, team manager and things like that. Successful recruitment always traditionally has two major components, right? And the two components are very simple because there are two parties in that situation. There's the candidate, and then there's the consumer or the company, we'll call that person. And the candidate, when they look at the interview, well, let's talk about the company. The company, when they're trying to fill a position, what they're trying to do is fill a need. They have a pressing need, and that need is causing them some pain. Whether it's pain, it's just aggravation because because they're required to do it, because they're short, because they're sick of staying in the office till 8 o'clock, because whatever it might be, that hiring manager and that company has determined that they have a need. Now, when you're looking for a job, and you're looking for something that's going to fill out your career and help develop to get you where you want to be, you have things that you want. Everybody has this rosy picture about, well, I'm going to spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week in this job. I should enjoy it. I have to get something out of it. So the perfect recruiting scenario, which doesn't really happen all the time, and in this economy it happens a lot less, but it's when your want as a candidate intersects with the employer's need. So it's where you're almost at a point where you're ready to assume that responsibility, and the employer is hoping that you're going to hit that responsibility, and then you're going to demonstrate once you're there that you're going to be able, not only capable, but that you're going to be able to make the most of it. So a lot of people, I'll get to you, a lot of people, what happens is this, they go into the interview processes, and one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people think is they say, well, what's the next step in my career? After I do this, where do I go? And that's the complete wrong thing that any employer wants to hear, because they're not hiring for your next job. That's your personal thing. You have to be able to assess that non-verbally. You have to be able to figure out, well, here, I'm actually decided to go out and apply for this position. So you have to think about, like, well, if I come to work here, how am I going to be able to make the most of this situation? How am I going to be able to maximize that time constant in my career? And how am I going to get able to absorb the most benefit? And that employer really wants to hear about how you're going to be able to do that job great and alleviate their pain. So you should think about that as you're looking at opportunities and that you're evaluating them, because it's great. Like if I had a research team and say, hey, Mike, why don't you come in and run my research team? That's good for me. Mike's done it twice. I have no risk. He's done it twice. He's a proven commodity in doing that.
And I get those offers all the time.
Of course.
Everybody who has a hole in their research team calls me and says exactly that. And my first question is, well, okay, I want my next step in my career, and we'll talk about plans and how I have ridiculously long-term plans and all that sort of thing. I know what I want to learn next. I have yet to find a research team opportunity where I fill someone's need, where they have an answer that gives me what I want to learn next, which is why I don't work for a research team.
And probably why you never will.
And probably why I never
Again.
will. Again, when I took those jobs in the first places, the answer, what I wanted at the time, was completely appropriate. I mean, and even when we worked together, when Scott called you up and said, I need X, Y, and Z. In that case, it was, I need a replacement for myself. I need someone that can grow into my role. And Lee knew that my thing was, I want to find a role that I can grow into. It was the perfect marriage. I think that was, though it didn't work out, and we've told that story a million times, though it didn't work out, it was exactly the right scenario. They had a need, I had a want, it fit perfectly.
And the interesting thing about that intersection was the CISO at the company that Mike worked for used to run the research team, used to run the Razor research team at Vineview.
Yeah.
So it was a very logical thing that Mike was there to be able to see somebody that he could potentially emulate to get to where he, at that time, felt he might want to head.
Yeah.
So it was, in other words, it was a very logical, and there was another one that Mike and I knew each other for two years or so until, that materialized. But, that's part of it. I mean, let me ask you a question. You guys have had your own interview. You had a point, Carol. I'm sorry. I don't know if we.
Just let me cover it later.
Go ahead. That's okay.
Great point you brought up last year, and I refer to it as the quit whining approach. Whereas you're in your job, and I think you mentioned it, a lot of people you talk to are like, I hate my job, I hate my boss, and it's all wrong, I want to find another job. I'm sure you get this all the time. But a lot of people fail to look at their current job, and they kind of look at it as the end all. They don't like their manager, or they don't like this particular job function. Well, you had made a point of how can you prove to upper management that you could be doing something better and that you've got another fit in the organization that might be the dream job for you with your current employer. And before you just quit and say, I've got to find a job someplace else, you get these people who are a year in each position because the problem's kind of following them.
Sure. Well, fool me once, if 3 people tell you you're drunk, you're normally drunk, right? So history has a way of repeating itself. One of my favorite things is that when, you spend some time with folks that have spent, I always say, well, they were there for 3 hours, which really equates to 6 to 9 months, but my terminology. But it is that like when somebody happens, and then they tell you about all the things that they accomplished in 6 months of being there, and I sit here and scratch my head and said, how can you possibly accomplish much in 6? The only thing you can accomplish is that you've learned that you don't want to be there. Like that's really the only thing you can really kind of put your finger on in that situation is that you have to be able to go through a life cycle. You have to give the person on the other side of the desk somewhat of a chance. And at that point in time, you're not going to work for that person or that company. When you go to work, you're going to work for yourself. Every day that you work, I like to think of it this way, every day you're trying out for another team. And that team might be that team where you are that day, but that team might be some place that you don't even know exists at this point in time. I like to use like another baseball analogy. All the players that play in AAA and AA and the minor leagues in baseball, they're not trying to make, if you're playing, Pawtucket, you're not trying to make the Red Sox and stuff like that. You're trying to make any one of the 30 major league teams. Do they still have Pawtucket? Anyhow,
Yeah, they still
Pawtucket's
still a team.
So you're trying to make them all. So in other words, you always should be pushing yourself, and I think that really kind of gets to that point. Is that don't go to work for your boss or don't go to work for your company. Go to work for yourself. Maximize these opportunities where you're there. I mean, how many people work in security groups that are overstaffed or that there's not enough work to do, right? And managers are always.
I don't think that exists.
That's the point, right?
Managers are always looking for people who want to take on responsibility. So get outside your comfort zone.
Can I jump in on
Yeah,
that?
I'm
Tom
sorry.
Peters is one of my business heroes and one of my favorite philosophers. And he always talks about, there's a great book, if you ever really want to just break your own brain, pick up a book called The Brand You 50. It was a little tiny book that Tom Peters put out in the late 90s. And it's written in this inimitable style that is just like, it turns everything you've ever thought on your head. But one of the things he talks about in that book is taking, if you're in that situation, taking the worst possible job that nobody else wants and finding a way to turn that into something amazing. That's the kind of, if you can do that, if you're in that security group and everybody's avoiding that one job that is just like too hard or too boring or too ridiculous. I have a great example, and I wasn't there for it. It happened long before I got to, and I'm back to that insurance company. There was a vice president at that insurance company who in his entire 15-year career was known for one single thing. And it was when he was a junior lowly admin in some investment group, and he took the most awful, horrible spreadsheets that they ever did, and he wrote an Excel macro to do a bunch of calculations that they were doing by hand. And 15 years later, they still talked about him as the guy that wrote the Excel macro. Why do I know this story when it happened 15 years before I worked there? Because he took the absolute, and excuse the words, the language, but he took the shittiest possible job and turned it into something awesome. That's the kind of thing that will get you noticed and will get you, will allow you to stick around. I mean, we're all in situations where there's too much work and not enough time. Figuring out how to take something awful there and turn it into something amazing is a really great thing to do.
It's a really good point. I've done a lot of work over the years with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. The one thing I will tell you that interesting about Price that they have a very strong campus recruiting program. And the people that make up their security group in New York City, they graduated from Carnegie Mellon, from RPI, from Cornell, from a lot of really good schools with good security programs and things like that. And they recruit this area. And I said to the partner who ran the group, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, you have all this young, bright-eyed, smart, talented, motivated people who are working in your team, how do you figure out which ones are going to be the stars? And you know what he said to me? He says, the ones that are going to be the stars are the ones that get on the projects that nobody wants to be on, and they become the projects that everybody wants to be on. And they're able to figure out a way to convert the customer and convert the opportunity and convert the engagement into something that's, is unique. And they have the technical chops, they have the charisma, they have the wherewithal, and they understand how to communicate upwards. They understand how to motivate people at their peer level. And it's something, he said it's a learned quality from someplace else that they didn't get on campus, or they got in campus from doing something different or for some other passion in their life. But that's kind of how they do it. And it's pretty interesting scenario. So I think that becomes kind of a decent goal, when you're in an environment, is really making the best of bad situations, because nobody's a hero for selling tickets to Yankee Stadium. They sell out every day. But go out and try to sell out the Royal Stadium and stuff like that. That would be really tough. If you can get a sellout in Kansas City every night, I tell you what, if I had a team and I wanted somebody who was going to figure out how to drive business my way, that would be the person I would want, So, go ahead.
Actually, I have a perfect example of that in the current job. One of the things my group owns is a job that's been passed around from department to department, like the redheaded stepchild that you hid in the closet. Is security responses to client RFPs. They're long, they're tedious, they'll take anywhere from 16 to 40 hours to do, and everybody hated it. And my boss and his boss and a couple of the other senior managers were racking their brains trying to figure out how to improve this, knowing that it still sucks up a huge amount of time. And we've been spending the last couple of months completely re-engineering the process and bringing in automated tools to cut the work down, but improve the quality. And it's got a lot of visibility by the senior salespeople, by senior IT management. They're all noticing it. So it's a great way to take a really bad job and make it something
People
great.
notice when you do that, because it's been around the org. Everyone's had it, and nobody wanted it.
Yeah, they just wanted it to die somewhere, and they couldn't kill it.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot and stuff like that.
That's okay. I was going to put these guys on the
Okay.
spot, but let's put him on the spot.
No.
I think everyone needs to know who you are and be good friends for the rest of your life.
No, and that's really, I appreciate that. But what I wanted, I thought was really good is that your evolution of how you developed your career, I think is something that's I'm pretty impressed with. I'm glad I was a part of that. But I mean, if you could tell everybody kind of like how you've evolved to get doing the things that you're doing now, from your days before Crow and I think that would be I think that would really be helpful to the young people here especially. I mean,
Like the 2-minute word.
That's true.
I guess I started at a, I guess the point is that I started at the number 10 or 12 CPA company in the country, right? It wasn't out of college. I went to work for PwC or something like that. It was a small mid-tier CPA company in the Midwest called Prochisic, and I went to work for them, and they had no information risk management team at the time. And I started with a group of like 4 or 5 other people. It didn't exist, and so we were kind of the first people started on it. And it's contrary to popular belief, because the thing is, you want to get in on the thing that's already there. But one of the things that we were able to do as a part of being there is that you have to carry everything. You have to do sales, delivery, client management, all those different types of things. I got involved, handling, negotiating deals, writing statements of work with, directly to the partner who was working on the financial side. Never would have seen that, right? And that's not something that people, I think, go directly into. I was looking for a new job, and he found me a position at a place in Chicago, which is where I'm living. It's where it was called Amber on Time, which I think that was their first. You must have done a great deal, because I was their first non-nepotism employee. I mean, not family, but people they had known. So I was the first non-known entity.
There were about 9 or 10 people at that time, right?
They were 9 or 10 people.
They're about 300 now.
They're about 300 now. Yeah, and they've merged
product companies like it's going out of style. I got involved there. They were getting involved with something called, before it was called PCI, it was called CISP. No one had heard of it. They were trying to sell this everywhere. In fact, they were also trying to sell security programs to the National Association of Realtors. They were doing anything that would catch on. And it just so happened they were ahead of the curve, built the right relationships, and now are the #1 company that does, they probably do 80 to 90% easily of all the different PCI audits globally. But while I was with them, they gave me the opportunity. If you're a consultant, you can move anywhere, so I moved out west. Happened to be living near Visa. They were looking for someone to start developing a training program because they wanted to expand the number of QSAs that exist. I gotta tell you, that was a hard decision to make. So you're talking about all of a sudden going from a employment position to one where you don't know what's gonna happen, and just jumping ship to start your own thing. So, had an opportunity. I said, and I gotta tell you, this is the best advice you can ever get is now is the perfect time to fail, right? Or, before you have tons of responsibility, that's the perfect time to fail. Right? It's so true, though.
That's true.
And everyone told me not to do it. My family told me not to do it. They said it's a stupid idea. A lot of friends said, I don't know, it sounds risky. But you know what? Yeah, a friend of mine, who Lee has also placed, DJ, he started his own company. He always told me, one of the things that a friend told him is he said, go bankrupt before you're 30. Go bankrupt before you're 30. And so I ended up doing the training program for Visa. That ended up flying me around the world, training consultants and people all over the world. I got to meet a wonderful, amazing group of people. Started our own company with a fellow colleague that I knew. So now we do basically all of the global PCI training education for Visa worldwide, and up until December we were training all the QSAs worldwide. So, I gotta say, if there's one thing that I believe in, and out of all this, it sounds like a great story, but there's one thing I believe in, it's coincidence.
Yes.
More so
Yeah.
than anything.
100% right.
Yeah.
And I live by a couple of mantras. One of them is that chance favors the prepared mind. If you are open to opportunity, right, and you're willing to take a risk, right, you will have the possibility to succeed. If you limit your opportunity, and this is the same way. Lee placed another really good friend of mine, Jacob Ansari. I remember when we were starting off, he said to me, he said, I never wanted to be a senior consultant. And we were all, first year consultants. I said, why? Because, I have the extra responsibility, I don't want to deal with it, I like doing the stuff, I like building tools, I like doing stuff. And that was perfect for him. He's doing that right now in a greater capacity. He's moved beyond senior consultant, but he's doing what he wants to do. When it comes to what do you want to do, so chance favors a prepared mind. The other thing, which I strongly live by, this is just my own little thing right now, is that nothing is impossible, but the impossible just takes longer. Right? You've heard lots of these nothing is impossible quotes, but nothing is impossible, the impossible takes longer. And it comes down to, are you open to the opportunity? And are you prepared to fail early?
And often.
And often. And often. That's the hardest part.
So I think there needs to be like we need to start a Facebook group or something, like the Lee Kushner Alumni of Entrepreneurs. There's a lot of us.
It dates back years.
Yeah, it really does.
I'm trying to age you.
No, but look, there are a lot of people that, I've been very fortunate to have worked with, I remember when George Kurtz was starting Foundstone, and I brought him to all those guys together at Ernst & Young back in like 97 and 98. And, I remember sitting with him at a restaurant like up in North Jersey, and he says, Lee, what do you think of this? I said, look, man, you always get another job.
Yeah.
I said, I always find you a job. You always get a job. Look, the markets are a little strange, but when you're young, you can, right? When you don't have, we don't have responsibility, where a lot of jobs become interchangeable to you, and that you still are building your skill set and really kind of defining kind of who you are and where you're going and stuff like that, you can always find a job. But as you move up and as you've built that foundation, I don't know if I would subscribe to the go bankrupt before you're 30 scenario. What I would say this is that I definitely wouldn't be afraid to take a lot of chances. And I wouldn't be afraid to have those experiences because you will learn from all of them later. And I think that what happens, and this is one of, I heard this once, it was completely uncareer related, but I think you could really apply it, is that your career's like this long yardstick, right? And if you just like picture if I was actually holding out a yardstick, and then you start, let's say you graduate college or before, you just start picking things up, you start marking where you are on that yardstick. And no matter where you go, all the things that you've done in the beginning, kind of, you build on them. All those things that happen, but that never leaves you. It never leaves you, right? I mean, so all those things that you have is think about those experiences that you build on, but that story, you're going to always explain that story to people. Somebody's going to say, well, how did you get started in information security? And it could be, well, you know what, I was really interested in it. I went out to this Hope conference, and I saw a guy speak on NLP, and I cornered him for an hour, and I was there. And, you know, it's funny.
Yeah,
I
he
was there
was
in
there
that group when Jolly introduced himself to Mike, and I happened to be there actually. I didn't know that like an intersection of cosmic stuff was happening there. But
Well, and actually, so to finish that story, funny, I didn't either when I moved back to Chicago and spoke at DePaul about hiring people for NeoHapsis, and these two show up in the audience.
The irony is, we had talked to NeoHapsis several months ago about getting someone from Neo to come.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
involved.
all these little cosmic things, right?
But you think about that yardstick though. I mean, and I think that's really important no matter where you are, is that all the decisions that you make in your career, you know, they have consequences.
Before you go there, can
Go
I
ahead.
jump in with
Go ahead.
something? Because Mike's told a bit of his earlier days, and I think there's something important for the younger people in the audience to catch. You and I have similar backgrounds, obviously. But I think the thing that benefited me the most in my early career, and you said it about starting a group, is finding a job or a few opportunities that give you the opportunity to do as many things as possible as quickly as possible.
Yes.
When I started at what was then called Hiverworld, I was lead penetration tester, head social engineer, IT guy, application security appliance developer, hacking kernels on OpenBSD, writing code for the product. I think I answered the phone a couple of times. I was the main SE and the head support person.
The company had 2 people. I'm joking.
No, it actually didn't.
I'm joking.
We had a 5-person technical team. It was kind of a bizarre company, and there was all kinds of background to it. But I had the opportunity to do all these things, that was probably in about 9 months. I did all of those different roles. That exposed me to so many different areas of technology and so many different opportunities that I got to really quickly understand where I wanted to go. And I got to really, when I went into one spot, I had this background of all these things underneath me. I mean, you being exposed to client engagements at the beginning and learning all the different pieces of consulting that if you had started as a junior consultant at PwC, you would have been isolated from.
And you know what? There's 1,000 stories like this that everyone can tell, right? But again, just like you said, if you start as an employee at any company, right, and there's a lot of people already playing the field, how are you going to stick out? It's going to be a lot harder. I remember once there was the company was trying to expand out of the Midwest, and they were calling them strategic clients in any other state. They would sell them work at like bare to nothing, right? And so it came the next year, and I needed to write the statement of work, and I just quoted our regular price without even thinking about it. And it just happened to be like 4 times the price we had charged them last year. So the client went back to the partner and said, "What the heck's going on?" And I got yelled at. You know what? That's that fail often.
Yeah.
You learn really quick about the side of business that you would never have seen, unless you're involved in those processes.
Yep.
And the other thing I guess I would also state, which is really key, and I see this with a lot of people, is make sure that you have a mentor. If there is not an advocate at that company for you, leave.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Well, or find one.
Or find one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Find a mentor who's going to advocate for you.
Yeah.
Because if you don't feel like you're learning from someone, or if you don't feel like you're learning on your own, the second you stop learning, the second it stops becoming beneficial, most people leave their. I left my first company 3 years after I should have. And you never really know when the time is to leave until it's too late. I think sometimes, but be aware. Be very aware.
And you get mentors, and you don't have, it's not just you get mentors at different stages of your career. I mean, it's not just when you're, I mean, it's, and I hate to use the term smartest person in the room, but, you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, it's normally a lonely feeling because whom are you going to learn from?
Yeah, that's generally my indication for it's time to leave or find something else. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I know there's something
you can go
seriously
now.
wrong with the company.
You can leave now.
Dude, not even close to that one. Not in this room.
Yeah, Carol.
I think you brought up the point of finding a way to distinguish yourself, and what I did back in the late 90s, I didn't have a degree in technology, dropped out of college, whatever, but I'd also spent 10 years in Bell Labs as a systems administrator where I learned an awful lot of stuff. It's a great atmosphere to be in. But how do you show on a resume that, yeah, I really do understand the technology? And at that time, I undertook writing for now IT World or Tech Target, it was then called Sunworld. This was monthly technical, very heavy technical articles that I didn't get paid nearly what the effort was put into to develop these things. But it got to be known, and people attached my name with it, like, oh yeah, she's got credibility, because I could refer to published work.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking at conferences, I hate public speaking. I'm speaking in about an hour.
25 minutes in.
I hate it.
But who's counting? Yeah.
But you have to do the things and stretch yourself into doing a little bit more to show what you've got to offer in your career.
I have to say it's easier now than it was then. I mean, I still get, it's funny, articles are awesome because I still get people emailing me about my first sysadmin article, which was on halted Linux firewalls, running a firewall in Linux at run level 0. But today, I mean, you've got blogs, you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got podcasts. I mean, it's so much easier. You don't have to convince an editor to publish your article. You just put it up. I mean, and the first thing that I do if I'm hiring someone is I figure out if they have a blog, and I read, and my first question is, does this make sense, and does this person have a clue? Which is exactly what people did with our articles back in the day, right? But now it's so much easier to find that if you have a clue, it's easier to show it. If you don't have a clue, and this is back to Lee's talent is a prerequisite, if you don't have a clue, you might want to get one before you start writing. You know, because
Well, they
there's
say
no
that if-
faster way to eliminate yourself than I go look at your blog and go, wow, that doesn't even make sense.
As Franklin said, it's better to be silent and to be thought.
And to be thought a fool than to open your mouth. Yes, exactly.
Franklin or Twain.
No, it's Franklin.
It's Franklin?
Yeah. You guys have been very quiet over here. What's going on? I'm putting you on the spot.
Sorry guys, we're gonna have to leave.
All right. Cool. Good luck,
Good.
Carol.
Good luck, Carol.
I have my panic attack.
Oh, you'll be fine. You've done this a million times at this point.
And my boss is in the room.
Oh, awesome.
That's good.
No pressure.
Have you guys already, I'm sure you guys have already done all this, but like, you know, I think a lot of the things that I'm hearing at least, and having walked in, is, you know, do everything. I know a few people in the room.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that they have done things that have distinguished themselves because they do them and they work harder than anyone else. Like,
Yeah.
you know, a good friend of mine, Damon, you placed Damon, right?
Mike knows
Yeah,
that.
and Damon.
I don't know if I can name a person that Lee hasn't placed. But you know, he goes crazy. He builds. That's all he does. He
Dude,
builds and builds and builds.
And he comes up with random ideas and just does them.
He has a job, right? He's an independent contractor and other things. But in the last 3 months, he's built 4 Twitter applications.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can do things, right? If you're in a position, you're like, you know, I'm in a job and I'm not going anywhere, and there's no real opportunity for me to do that. The second you say that there is not something, right? You know, that's a roadblock that you put up, right? Or you say, oh, you know, I've been in this too long, or I don't have the skills, or you know, I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm too, you know, whatever it is. You defeat yourself right there because there is an opportunity. Every day there's someone coming up with a crazy thing.
The thing
How much money do you think that guy made off the iPhone app? You know?
Really?
Too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
It was something like $30,000 in the first 2 days.
You know?
Pretty awesome. I think you hit on something though. That only works, and you actually weren't in the room when we talked about this a little while ago. We talked. John was talking about burnout, and you know, people who work too hard. You can only do that if you love what you're doing. You can't. You and I, we work in this industry, and Damon is another example. I mean, we all work insane numbers of Somebody asked me what I was doing earlier today, and I'm like, well, I got this company going on. I'm doing this project with this guy, and I've got this project going on. Anybody who knows you guys are both
Someone
nodding.
asked what you were doing, and
Yeah.
I said, I don't think Mike knows everything he's doing.
No, I actually don't. I don't have a full list of all my projects because I have so many of them, and it sometimes makes me insane. But that's not. I mean, that is the point.
But then to the other side of that is do one thing and do it well.
Well, but all the projects are related to that one thing, right? All the projects.
I
are-
like that.
Yeah.
That I like that. I'm more good like that.
But
I
see,
gotta say, you know, people are not remembered in history for being diplomatic. Like,
Yeah.
You know, how many famous quotes start with, I saw both sides of the perspective very well. You know, it's true.
dude, that just became. I think that should be a famous quote.
You have people that people get remembered for sticking with doing one thing and doing it more fabulously than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Or doing a whole bunch of things more fabulously.
I mean,
Tesla.
What was the most boring protocol 2 years ago?
Uh,
DNS. What one person is known for DNS more than anything else?
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to the pick the thing that everyone doesn't want.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the one that when I have time and when I'm just like, okay, I'm out of projects, I need something, I'm going to go after Windows terminal services because nobody wants to touch that protocol. It's ugly, it's annoying, it's frustrating, and there's so many nuggets of gold in there. It's just I still have projects on my list, but that one's on that, like, if I'm ever bored, that's where I'm going list. But I think you have to have that list. That's another part of it. You know, you talked about preparation, and we talk a lot about planning. If you don't know what your next thing is, if you don't know where you're going, and I advocate, because I'm a little crazy, my plans go out to 30 years. I have a 30-year plan. You know, I'm probably the only one in the room that does. But at the same time, if you have a plan like that, obviously it changes. Every year my 30-year plan changes somewhat. But it gives you an anchoring point to ask yourself where you're going from here. That anchors me in a lot of the decisions I make. I take on a lot of projects, but they're all consistent with where I'll be in 30 years. So though my life looks chaotic to some of the people around me, there's an absolute master plan that takes me from here to there. I think that's the kind of thing that will ground you if you're trying to live in a chaotic world. If you're not of the I'm going to take one thing and do it well state, if you're just doing things randomly, all you get is chaos. If you're doing a whole lot of things that lead you toward a direction, even if no one else knows what the direction is, it's important. I mean, you can do it.
And tie it back around to the whole jobs thing. Like, if someone was to come to you and say, I'm looking for a job, right? And say, well, what kind of a job? Say, I'll do anything. Or information security. Like, who do you even direct that person to? Right, where do you start? If the person says, I think I'm the best pen tester there is. Okay, now I can narrow it down.
Yes.
Right?
So- and I'm-
I think I'm the best web application tester.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Then I can narrow it down.
So let me give you insight to, like, you know, how people hire, right? I mean, the way that people hire is this, is that when companies hire, they hire, you know, they hire, we talked about, you know, where they have a pain point, but they're always looking, you know, companies are always looking to find a hard to find skill. So you have to figure out, you know, something, you know, whenever you're doing something, you know, having some sort of vision as to kind of where things are heading is important. I mean, I remember almost clear as day when we were talking about, you know, about Trustway, we were talking about some of the things that they were doing, and so, you know, they were starting to do some things with the credit card providers and, you know, tying some things with Visa.
Every part of that
I mean, and look, and give Andy and Bob a lot of credit for at least being able to see that market and building a business around it and marketing it, you know, very well and hiring good people. But, you know, the thing is this, is that, you know, have some vision in your career. I mean, and the way to get vision is by talking to people, you know, here, you know, this conference is not a lot of people. I mean, you go to RSA, you go to Black Hat, I mean, it's party after this, and there's just tremendous amounts of, you know, massive people. But here, like, I mean, in a room last night, I mean, and the people here, I mean, I find them to be extremely approachable. And, you know, and they're folks that, you know, I consider to be, you know, some people that have been, you know, more successful or less successful in their quote-unquote business careers, but in their technical careers, they're all extremely successful. and they all and to the most part, I think that a lot of folks that are at this conference, they're not as exclusive as, some of these like real stuffed shirt type people that you would see in a corporate environment and stuff like that, or, the guy with the herringbone jackets and the mock turtlenecks that populate Silicon Valley CEO offices and stuff like that. And you got to get a, you have to be great if you qualify for a lunch appointment. But what I'm saying to you is this: is that they're good angles to actually being in places like this and listening to what a Dan Gear might have to say. I mean, or listening to Adam Shostak talking about yesterday he was talking about how he applies scientific theories and different things to security. I thought that was really fascinating, and I was thinking wow, how freaking smart do you have to be to actually think of that stuff?
I think listening to Adam talk about anything is fascinating. He's just smarter
but most people, they want people to help to contribute to, they're thirsty for that. And they also, I think that a lot of the folks that are here at this conference, more so than other folks, I think a lot of folks here didn't forget where they came from. I think that a lot of the folks can remember, sitting in a cramped apartment, with 30, servers and, hacking a bunch of stuff and, putting out a bunch of PR and, and tools and stuff like that. And, being, could you make sure, if you were if we turned the clock back 10, 12, 15 years ago and you were just a young person and you had something contribute, you run into one of these, loft guys and they say, hey, you want me to join, could I join your group? Or, hey, come on in, you're one of us, I think and I don't know how that all kind of works, I'm still kind of an outsider, but I don't know what the initiation process is for that, but
there's a secret handshake.
Or CDC or any of the groups or attrition or whatever it might be, right? The idea, if you can turn yourself, you're never going to see that again. Not in this industry, I don't think. But I think that all those folks understand that that's where the great ideas come from. The great ideas come from people who were kind of like them when they were, and now they all have they all have responsibility at this point in time. Some have dealt with it better than others. But
the Scott Blake joke.
Yeah, what's the difference between a information security professional and a hacker? Mortgage. But that was also the time where you couldn't really make a good living as a security professional. That good jobs were really hard to find. Now we're in a time where the problem in this industry, and you guys to think about this, is that this industry has been so mass marketed by, and I'm not going to discriminate when I say this, but it's been mass marketed by ISC squared, it's been mass marketed by SANS, it's been mass marketed by ethical hacker this and ISACA and all the different certification bodies of the world that said,
even beyond that, the VCs and the product vendors. The product vendors drive a lot of the FUD out there.
So, but it's been mass marketed to say in such a way where, you go on a, top 10 new careers, information security. That guy Foot over here. 20% more if you're if you're earning $30,000, you make $36,000 if you get a SANS certification. But then I have a guy that comes up to me who's making $120,000. Say, look, I just passed my SANS certification. I expect $145 minimum. I'm like, dude, yeah. I'm like, you've completely missed the point. So. But I'm like, look, if you find that job, let me know, So, but the thing is this, is that you have to understand that the future of this industry is going to be about differentiation. It's not going to be about what letters you have next to your name. It's not going because that's going to be the entry point.
And
it's going to be the checkbox, and that's what it's become.
So the funny thing about that is in putting it in a historical context like you're talking about, the past of this industry is differentiation. Before all the certifications, what made you matter was what you did. I remember being in college and reading all the Loft stuff, and those guys were amazing. the coolest thing in the world for me, even 10 years later, was to get to meet all those guys. I mean, that was like, they were rock stars to me. But they were rock stars not because they wrote funny zine files, which they did, but they weren't rock stars because they were funny. They were rock stars because the stuff they came up with was pretty awesome.
Street cred. That's street cred.
It's street cred.
That's the new term, right? Street cred.
And back to your question earlier, I mean, 10, 15 years ago, I was you, right? At some point, we're all you. We don't have any experience. We don't have any, formal job. All we have is the stuff we do in our apartment. Do awesome stuff, and you will be awesome. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So find something you love exploring and explore it to the level that no one else in the world has. I know a guy who is like the world's expert at RACF security. If there's some, RACF is mainframe security, for anybody who doesn't know.
That's so funny that you even have to define that. I mean,
well, yeah,
it's funny. It's funny. That's, I mean, that you have to actually.
I would bet half the room has never had their hands on a mainframe keyboard. In fact, I bet 80% of the room looking around has never had their hands on a mainframe keyboard. This guy is the world's expert at it, and there's only there's only a certain number of companies that are really hiring him now, but he gets hired for jobs at an incredible amount. I mean, his salary is ridiculous because there's nobody better at that one little thing.
There's that one skill.
Yeah, it's the one skill scenario. I mean, I think the thing is to become known as something. It doesn't matter what it is. And you look around the room, and I think most people, because of Twitter, know who he is. I think most people, because of these kind of talks and some other stuff I've done, know who I am. But it's all about figuring out how to get yourself known as something. Whether it's for one thing or whether it's for multiple things, you have to differentiate. You have to be the person at something.
And that's, really talking about, developing your own personal brand.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's gonna, brand you as the blank guy.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Long, he's the Google hacking guy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also the no-tech hacking guy.
Yeah,
This
but
is
he's
where.
always gonna be the Google hacking guy to most people.
But the funny thing is, this is where it goes back to, you don't always have to be known for one thing.
Right.
And this is in the slides too, but you can have multiple brands to multiple people. I mean, I talk about careers all the time. I also talk about social engineering all the time.
Come on.
They're totally separate things. And I can be known for both without any conflict between them. I can have 2 separate brands or 3 separate brands or 8 separate brands without any conflict. You can be the person for just about anything. Yeah, what's up?
What I wanted to ask in response to that is, did you get into these particular areas or branding or what you're being typecast as more because you saw a niche that needed to be filled?
No.
Or
No.
or because you
I
that's
picked
just
something
what
I
you're
love.
passionate about?
Yeah, you pick what you love. I mean, I think, I personally think if you don't love doing something, you're not going to be able to. Let me actually take that off the
You can't
table.
fake it for a long time.
Yeah.
You can fake it for a short period of time.
Yeah, and
You really can't fake it.
I know for me, if I'm not interested in it, I can't fake it for more than about 10 minutes. I am, and anybody who's known me, these 2 are laughing already. I have the worst case of ADD on the planet. And I just cannot, if I'm not interested, I'm done. Like, so if it wasn't something I was totally into, I wouldn't last long enough on it to actually manage to brand myself on it. The social engineering stuff goes back to something that I started when I was about 18, when I got really interested in communication and how we communicate. And I learned NLP and I learned hypnosis and I learned all these different things, all these different technologies and tools that allowed me to be a better communicator. And it just so happens that it corresponds to the other things I do as far as allowing me to break into people just as well as I break into machines. The career stuff started partially when I met Lee in the elevator in Vegas, but
Talk about chance meetings.
yeah, talk about chance meeting. He and I met in the Mirage in Vegas.
I've
as walking
only
to
stayed at
Black
the
Hat.
Mirage once.
Yeah, me too.
Once. Siegfried and Roy got me.
It was all about the tiger stripes. He put me in
That's
that.
what Mike was wearing, actually. Nothing but tiger stripes.
Leisure suit. So he placed me at that job in in that insurance company, and for all kinds of reasons, I got really interested in careers. All the people there were a lot of people there who were really unhappy with their jobs, and didn't subscribe to Mike Don's philosophy about failing early and often, because they had sort of accepted their lot in life and decided that. Someone actually said to me, and I've quoted this, and I don't think anyone really believes it's a verbatim quote, but it is. He said to me, "I put my resume on Monster and no one emailed me, so there mustn't be another job for me." That was the world that I lived in at the time.
Your revolver, sir.
Yes, exactly. So, Emily, you've read Parachute, right? You read that book. That book was written at the time that I lived in that environment, and I wrote it entirely for the purpose of giving it to those people. That's why it comes off as such a rant, like why I'm trying to bludgeon you to death with something. That's why I wrote it that way, is because I really was trying to bludgeon these people into thinking that there was a life outside of this organization.
That does make more sense.
Yeah, it really does read like I'm yelling, doesn't it? For like 130 pages. And so that was where it came from. And because I was in this world and I was writing on my blog about careers, and I'm just trying to get this message through to all the people that are around me who I know read my blog and I know read the stuff that I do. I just talked about it for a while, and then Lee and I decided to get up on stage at we did DEF CON first, and then we did RSA, and it's just been sort of a snowball from there. But it was because I had this overwhelming urge to talk about it that the brand developed, not because I thought, hey, information security needs people to talk about careers. Let me fill the niche. Does that make sense?
I mean, you want to hear like a real interesting story? I mean, it's completely maybe non-applicable to your guys' backgrounds, but I mean, I used to. I went to college. I played baseball a long time ago, about 50 pounds ago. I played baseball in college, and I was a baseball guy. And I worked for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I came up to New Jersey for it was 4th of July. I came up to go visit some friends, and somebody said to me, he said, "Look, I want to introduce you to a guy," and the guy happened to turn out to be my first boss. And I said, "Well, why do you want me to meet him?" He said, "Well, I don't know exactly what he does, but he always tells me how hard it is to find people for what he wants to do, what he does, and every time I ask him to describe, the type of person, your character always kind of comes up." And I said, "Interesting." And I got to meet him, and he told me that, what he did, he recruited information systems auditors, and he was the guy in information systems audit. So that's kind of how I learned about RACF audit and stuff like that. But he had a large contract with Ernst & Young, and he said, "Look," he goes, "they're kicking off this new business line." He goes, "Something about hackers and stuff." Well, he said, "Something about hackers and shit like that." He goes, "Nobody knows how to do that. Why don't you come up and start this deal?" And I said, "That's interesting. I just paid for a master's degree. I got a good career at the Dodgers. I mean, it's kind of what I wanted to do." I went to New York Library one day, looked up information security. This is 1996. And I'm sitting here going.
Were you looking it up on microfilm?
It wasn't the internet. I mean, I was, looking at articles and stuff like that. And I said, the only thing I knew about information security was war games. Like, that's kind of what I knew of it. And I said, "Wow, this is pretty interesting." And you're talking about it'd be a career of the future and stuff like that. And then there was this big thing, they had this before Monster, and so there was this big red book. They used to call it the Red Book. It was by Kennedy Publications. It was about that thick. It was a directory of all executive recruiters. And I went through that entire book in the library, and I couldn't find the term information. So I looked under IT, I looked under audit, and I couldn't find anybody who did information security recruiting. But there were pages and pages of people who did accounting, and pages of people who did lawyers, and pages of people that did programmers, and whatever it might be, financial services. And It just really came out to it. I said, you know what? I said, I'm confident in myself. I can always find a job if I need to. But this seems like it might be the right thing at the right time, and what do I have to lose? And
Fail early and often, right?
well, yeah. I mean, fortunately, I didn't fail, but I failed a lot of times. In the way to getting there, you know. I mean, if you had told me that I would be able to be on the same podium at people that are speaking in some of the other rooms 12 years ago or 13 years ago, I would have told you you were crazy. There was no way that this industry would ever accept an outsider as, you know, somebody who is a recruiter. It was a very dirty word. I mean, you know, I was probably like one step below the man, you know. You know, it's the worst man, I guess. But I mean, it was real interesting. And then like a real thing. So I started this job, right? And this is kind of a crazy story too. But so my grandfather was at his dentist. I just told my grandfather about what I was doing, and he was at the dentist at the time. And he says, you know, I took this magazine out of the dentist's office, and it was a Forbes business, and the cover was Digital Hitman. And who was on that cover but Jeff Moss? I pick up the phone and call Jeff, introduce myself to him. We start a friendship. He wound up working at Ernst & Young for a really short period of time and stuff like that. And I remember us telling the story the other day of being at DEF CON my first time, and I wore suits still, and I was like I had like people are you a Fed? Are you a Fed? You know, it was really kind of crazy, but like to just kind of see the whole thing kind of evolve in 13 years and stuff like that has really, and from my perspective, it's really been interesting because I get to see people at different stages of their life, and now after 10 years, different stages of their development, you know? And, you know, the one constant that we all have in our careers is time. So like everything that you do, you're still going to be, you know, working 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever that number is, years down the road from now. So everything that you do weaves that story. And you start building on all those different types of experiences to eventually get you. So having that plan, having that vision to think about what you might want to become, not what you want to do, because you never really say, people say, well, what do you want to be when you grow? You never be something. You become something, or you become somebody, or you develop that skill. But that's done through hard work. That's done through sacrifice, and whether that's sacrificing of your time, it's sacrificing some things with your family, all these different types of things, you figure out what that equation is for you. And your career is basically unique. It's your career. Nobody can tell you what's right or wrong. There's no standard plan. Your plan is your plan, and your plan can change. Don't be afraid for it to change. Don't be afraid to step outside and go in some different directions, but don't lose focus on whatever that real goal is, because as soon as you start losing focus on that, about what, you know, about your makeup and about, you know, the things that you want to accomplish, you know, that's when you start getting lost. And if you get lost enough times, you wind up with an economy like this hitting you square in the face, and those are the difficult calls in my office right now. It's the person who zigzagged so many times that chased the dollar, that only did things because they paid them. You know, Carol said the other day, she was saying here earlier, she's saying, you know, well, I was writing these articles and nobody was paying me to do it. The best jobs are the ones that nobody pays you for. The best job, because they're not really, because those are things you do because you want to do, and you will get paid for them in spades later. You give away for, you know, your time, your knowledge and stuff like that. Never be afraid to share, because it'll all come back to you. And I'm not all, you know, believing in all karma and all that other, you know, metaphysical, but it does come back, because, you know, you're doing things, when you do something because you want to do it, and you're doing things because you have to, you know, because you have that passion, people notice that. And when they notice it, you'll get included. And when you get included, opportunities come. And then it's your job to make the most of them. So,
I think that was Lee's version of The Secret.
I don't even know about that. That's that black book with the red writing on Oprah, right?
Yeah, it's the one on
Good.
Oprah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You know, I just, because you opened the floor here, you know, one of the the things that I've seen and really strike me about other people is also, and I think and Lee talked about this earlier, is the concept of inclusion. You know, I got to tell you, Lee and also Richard Thiem have a quality that I have not seen in many others, which is that they are 100% inclusive. There is not a security conference you will go to that you won't see Lee at. I have been to the smallest, middle of nowhere, never expecting to see anyone, and he's there talking to people, talking to everyone. You know, because it's about building long-term relationships. And I remember I was at it was an event in Michigan, I think only one I went on like once or twice, called Rubicon, outside of Detroit of all places. Richard Thiem is sitting there, he's handing out his business card to like 15-year-old kids, and it's got an 800 number on it, and he says, "Call me anytime." You know, and I thought, really? Like, come on. But then, after I saw it about a second time, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. That guy is going to be his contact at some place, at some later point in the future. That's going to educate him. You know? And, one of the things that was mentioned earlier is that, include other people. Is that, if you're looking towards the future, you may be looking for a job now, but you may be looking to hire someone later. Right? You may be looking, eventually, you want to surround yourself with smarter and smarter and smarter people.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything needs to be said at that. Well said.
I think there's a break now. I mean,
Yeah, y'all want to take a couple minutes of break, and then
do you
we'll
guys
actually do the slides.
Yeah, and if you don't come back, we won't feel hurt. I mean, there's
Yeah,
other
although
sessions.
we
and
have
stuff
some good stuff in
No, we do have
here
good
that
stuff,
we
but I
haven't
won't feel
covered.
hurt. I mean,
So, while we're having a break, Daniel, tell me about your white paper. The sign works very well.
I'm pleased with the results, yeah.
Okay.
Well, basically, about 2 months ago, I wrote a research paper investigating into new methods of, or not, at least poorly explored methods of operating system thinking. Most operating system thinking
Thank you.
is done on layers 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So like tools like Nmap, EOF, Queso, Nessus are all doing, layer 2 and 3 stuff.
3 and 4 more accurately.
Sorry,
Yeah.
3 and 4.
It's okay.
But, it's all being done with like TCP IP stack values and things like that. The problem with that is that there's all
that you probably don't know about. And we're going to talk about how
or at least fingerprint, such that it's going to be mangled by the time it gets to you. So in a lot of situations, the results are just wrong, or at least mangled. And then there's some situations. Well, anyway, getting down to brass tacks, I thought nobody's doing application level OS fingerprinting, and the people who are either focusing on very specific applications, or they're doing banner grabbing. They're doing exactly what all years of security knowledge have told us all not to do. Don't trust what you're told. So banner grabbing does just that. So I kind of set out and said, can I find ways to fingerprint applications that don't require login credentials, that can be done remotely using application level queries and not trusting the information given? And I was actually able to find quite a bit.
There's a lot out there. There's a lot of it. Talk to the guys at Encircle. We started that process in 2003. They have a tree of about 1,800 specific applications, probably more than 1,800 now, almost all of them which contribute to the operating system fingerprinting scenario. And it's all done through behavioral. When I was there, my thing was we would never do a banner check for anything, no matter what it was. We would never use a banner for anything. So all of that stuff is based on the same idea. So you might find that there's some kindred spirits there, but also you might find that they've learned things that you haven't. So if you want an introduction, send me an email, and I'll introduce you to the right people. Here, I'll give you my card. Yeah, that was a problem we recognized a long, long time ago. But the thing about it is all that Nmap stuff works well enough that no one needs to solve it, because it works in the 80% case. You get way better data, hugely better data. In fact, for a while, we didn't start doing stack fingerprinting until 2004. That was our only fingerprinting system for about a year to 18 months. And it was as effective as what the stack guys got. So yeah, lots of interesting data there.
Do you want a copy of the paper?
Yeah, please, send it to me in email. Because I've probably lived some of the use cases that you came up with, and I will probably argue with the others.
Michael put that on his project list.
Yeah, exactly. I got rid of another VA yesterday.
Another virtual assistant?
Yeah. I have the worst
See,
time with
I'm
assistants.
thinking about unionizing the virtual assistants.
That would be hilarious. So I couldn't fire anymore, you mean?
I think about unionizing, with Walmart, we'll unionize the virtual assistants.
That would be funny.
So is this, is that, what do you call it? Is NCircle using that like privately, like not